The Galactic Military Academy sprawled across 3 moons of Zirion Prime, its crystalline domes gleaming under the binary suns. For 2 centuries, the galaxy's finest warriors had trained within these halls, representing 47 different species from the core worlds. The Academy's motto, carved in ancient Veltaran script above the main entrance, read, "Strength through Unity." What it really meant was, know your place in the hierarchy. And humans? Well, they were at the very bottom. "Look at them," sneered Veltok, a 7-foot-tall Mentarian whose exoskeleton could deflect plasma rounds. His mandibles clicked with amusement as he watched the human contingent file into the morning assembly, walking bags of water and bone. How did the council ever approve their admission? His companion, a hulking Korvaxi with 4 arms and skin like living rock, rumbled with laughter. Apparently their planet is classified as a Deathworld. The admissions board thought it might have made them tough. He flexed his massive biceps. Clearly they were wrong. The humans numbered only 12 among the Academy's 300 cadets. They stood out like sore thumbs, their pale skin and small stature making them appear almost childlike next to their alien classmates. While other species boasted natural armor, enhanced strength, or advanced telepathic abilities, humans brought nothing but stubborn determination and an alarming tendency to smile at inappropriate times. Among them was Kala Voss, a 19-year-old girl from the colony world of New Terra. At 5'4" and weighing barely 130 pounds, she looked like a strong breeze might knock her over. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her green eyes held a calm intelligence that most of her classmates mistook for fear. "That one there," Veltok pointed a clawed finger at Kala, "she's the smallest of the bunch. I heard she scored highest on their entrance exams. Probably cheated." The morning briefing began and Commander Brix, a distinguished Altarian with silver scales and 3 eyes, addressed the assembled cadets. His voice echoed through the vast chamber with practiced authority. "Today marks the beginning of Phase 3 training," he announced. "Hand-to-hand combat. No weapons, no technology. Just skill, strength, and instinct." His middle eye focused on the human section. "Some of you may find this challenging." A ripple of laughter spread through the alien ranks. Kala simply folded her hands and listened, her expression unchanged. She'd heard worse during her 3 months at the Academy. Much worse. What her classmates didn't know was that humans had been fighting for survival since before most of their species had developed written language. And Kala Voss had learned to fight in the underground rings of New Terra's mining colonies, where losing meant going hungry, and going hungry meant dying. But they would learn soon enough. If the Academy had a poster boy for genetic perfection, it would be Zeph'tar Grimjaw. The 8-foot-tall Nexorian stood like a monument to evolutionary superiority, his obsidian skin rippling with muscles that could crush steel beams. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world where only the strongest survived, and Zeph'tar was the strongest of the strong. 2 rows of serrated teeth gleamed when he smiled, which he did often, especially when causing pain. Tension maggots. Zeph'tar's voice boomed across the training hall as he addressed a group of first-year cadets. "Today you get the privilege of witnessing true combat excellence." He cracked his knuckles, each pop sounding like a gunshot. "Try not to embarrass yourselves too badly." The Academy's combat program was ruthlessly efficient. The cadets were ranked weekly based on performance, with the top tier earning privileges like better food, private quarters, and assignment to elite units upon graduation. The bottom tier got scraps, shared bunks, and if they were lucky, janitorial duty on some backwater station. Zeph'tar had held the #1 spot for 18 consecutive months, a record that had made him something of a legend. "Human trash," he muttered, his crimson eyes scanning the group until they landed on Kala. "You there, pink skin. Step forward." Kala raised an eyebrow but didn't move. "I'm sorry. Are you talking to me?" "Did I stutter, meatbag?" Zeph'tar's laugh was like gravel in a cement mixer. "Yes, I'm talking to you. What's your name, little girl?" "Kala Voss." Her voice was steady, conversational. "And you're Zeph'tar Grimjaw. Top of the class, undefeated champion, heir to the Nexorian throne. She paused, tilting her head. Also, apparently, someone who gets his kicks bullying people half his size. The training hall fell silent. Even the ventilation system seemed to hold its breath. No one talked to Zeph'tar like that. Ever. Zeph'tar's smile widened, revealing more teeth than any creature had a right to possess. Oh, this is rich. The little Deathworlder has a mouth on her. He took a step closer, his massive frame casting a shadow over Kala. Do you know what I did to the last cadet who showed me disrespect? Let me guess, Kala said, completely unfazed. You beat them up and felt really good about yourself afterward. I put him in the medical bay for 3 weeks. Zeph'tar's voice dropped to a menacing whisper. His arm still doesn't work right. Congratulations, Kala replied with a shrug. You injured someone weaker than you. That must have been really challenging. The other cadets watched in horrified fascination. Maya Chen, another human, looked like she was about to faint. Torque, a mid-ranking Veldtorian, found himself torn between admiration for the human's courage and certainty that he was about to witness a murder. Zeph'tar's fists clenched, his knuckles turning white against his dark skin. You want to dance, little girl? Fine. But when I'm done with you, you'll be begging to transfer to the sanitation corps. Looking forward to it, Kala said, and smiled. 3 days later, the combat training hall buzzed with anticipation. Word had spread through the academy like wildfire about the upcoming showdown between Zeph'tar and the mouthy human girl. Cadets from all 3 training levels had found excuses to be present, packing the observation decks until they resembled the Colosseum crowds of ancient Rome. Commander Brix stood at the center of the training mat, his 3 eyes scanning the assembled crowd with obvious displeasure. This is a training exercise, not entertainment, he announced, though his tone suggested he knew his words were falling on deaf ears. Zeph'tar entered the hall like a conquering hero, his massive frame drawing appreciative murmurs from the alien cadets. He'd stripped down to regulation training gear, revealing a physique that looked like it had been carved from living granite. Scars crisscrossed his torso, each one a testament to battles won and enemies defeated. Ladies and gentlemen, Zeph'tar announced, spreading his arms wide, today you witness the inevitable conclusion of evolution versus devolution. He flexed his biceps, muscles bulging like small mountains. In one corner we have 200 million years of selective breeding, genetic optimization, and warrior culture. He gestured to himself with mock humility. In the other corner we have a talking monkey from a dirtball planet. The alien cadets erupted in laughter. Even some of the instructors couldn't suppress their chuckles. Kala, meanwhile, sat quietly on a bench, methodically wrapping her hands with training tape. She might as well have been preparing for a leisurely jog. Look at her, Zeph'tar continued, warming to his audience. She's not even scared. Do you know why? Because her primitive brain can't comprehend the level of pain she's about to experience. He cracked his neck, the sound echoing through the hall. It's like trying to explain quantum physics to a house pet. To demonstrate his point, Zeph'tar called forward Grex Mole, a heavily muscled thoraxian who ranked 15th in the class. The insectoid alien stood nearly 7 feet tall, his chitinous armor gleaming under the artificial lights. Show them what real strength looks like, Zeph'tar suggested. Grex Mole lunged forward with predatory speed, his forearms moving in a blur. He was fast, trained, and had 30 pounds on any human male. The fight lasted exactly 6 seconds. Zeph'tar caught him mid-strike, lifted him overhead with one hand, and slammed him into the mat with casual indifference. The impact left a Grex Mole-shaped dent in the reinforced flooring. Next, Zeph'tar called cheerfully. Veltok stepped forward, confidence radiating from his mantis-like frame. His species were natural-born killers, with reflexes that could track a hummingbird's flight. He lasted 9 seconds, ending up in an unconscious heap beside Grex Mole. Anyone else want to warm me up before the main event? Zeph'tar asked, dusting off his hands. The crowd roared its approval, chanting his name. The Bets were being placed openly now, with odds running heavily against the human. Some cadets were wagering on how long she'd stay conscious rather than whether she'd win. Kala finished wrapping her hands and stood up, rolling her shoulders to loosen them. The movement was fluid, graceful, like a dancer preparing for a performance. She walked to the center of the mat, her footsteps silent on the padded surface. "Ah, the guest of honor arrives," Zeph'tar announced. "Tell me, little human, do you have any last words? Perhaps a message for your family back on Deathworld?" Kala looked up at him, her green eyes calm as a still pond. "Just one question." "Oh, this should be good. Ask away." "When you're lying in the medical bay later, reflecting on what went wrong, what excuse are you going to use?" The laughter died in the alien throats. Commander Brixek sighed deeply, checking his chronometer. "Very well. Standard combat rules apply. Fight until submission or unconsciousness. Begin when ready." Zeph'tar circled the mat like a predator savoring the hunt, his massive form casting shifting shadows across the training floor. The alien crowd pressed closer to the barriers, their excited chatter creating a constant buzz of anticipation. Credits were changing hands as bookmakers shouted odds that made Kala's chances of survival seem astronomically slim. "You know what your problem is, human?" Zeph'tar called out, his voice carrying easily over the crowd noise. "You think courage equals strength. It's adorable, really. Like a newborn thinking it can hunt alongside its parents." Kala remained in her corner, quietly stretching her legs and rotating her arms. Her movements were economical, purposeful. She wasn't showing off or trying to intimidate anyone. She was simply preparing her body for what was to come. "Let me educate you about evolution," Zeph'tar continued, now playing entirely to his audience. "My people, the Nexorians spent 50,000 years fighting for survival on a world where the gravity could crush your bones and the weakest predator could snap you in half." He flexed his massive chest, the muscles rippling like liquid steel. "We didn't have the luxury of your peaceful little gardens and friendly animals. We were forged in fire, blood, and endless warfare." The alien cadets cheered appreciatively. Several held up devices, recording the spectacle for posterity. This was going to be legend material, the day the undefeated champion put the uppity human in her place. "Every generation, we grew stronger," Zeph'tar went on, clearly enjoying the spotlight. "Genetic optimization through natural selection. The weak died, the strong bred, and over millennia we became the perfect warriors you see before you." He gestured grandly to his physique. "Meanwhile, your species was picking berries and running from saber-toothed cats." Kala nodded thoughtfully, as if she found his lecture genuinely interesting. "That's fascinating. Tell me more about your training regimen." Zeph'tar blinked, momentarily thrown off by her calm response. "My training? Child, I've been fighting since I could walk. Nexorian combat schools begin at age 3. By age 10, I was sparring with full-grown warriors. By 15, I had killed my first opponent in ritual combat." His voice swelled with pride. "I have mastered 17 different fighting disciplines, each one more lethal than your entire species' military doctrine." While he spoke, Kala watched him move. She noted how he favored his right side, how his left knee locked slightly when he pivoted, how his breathing pattern changed when he got excited. Every gesture, every boast, every theatrical flourish was providing her with valuable intelligence. 50-1 against the human, shouted a Veltorian bookmaker from the stands. "Last chance for easy money." At 100-1 called out Grex Mole, who had recovered enough to watch from the medical section. "I want to recoup my medical expenses when she gets flattened." The crowd erupted in laughter. Even some of the human cadets were shaking their heads in resignation. Maya Chen looked like she was about to be sick. Zeph'tar basked in the adulation, turning slowly to acknowledge his fans. "You know what?" he announced magnanimously. "I'm feeling generous today. Little human, I'm going to give you a sporting chance." He cracked his knuckles one by one, each pop echoing through the hall. I'll only use one hand. Maybe fight on my knees to make it more fair." The crowd went wild. This was better than they'd hoped for. Not only were they going to see the human get demolished, but they were going to see Zeph'tar do it with style and panache. "That's very kind of you," Kala said, her voice barely audible over the noise. "But I think you're going to need both hands." Zeph'tar's smile widened. "Oh, sweetie, you really don't understand what you're up against, do you?" He began loosening up, rolling his massive shoulders and cracking his neck. "I've fought Korvaxi berserkers who could punch through tank armor. I've battled Scytheran assassins who move faster than your eyes can track. I've defeated champions from a dozen worlds, each one supposedly the best their species had to offer." He paused his warm-up routine and looked directly at her, his crimson eyes gleaming with condescending amusement. "And you think you, a tiny little girl from a backwater planet, are going to present some kind of challenge?" Kala finished her stretches and stood up, rolling her shoulders one final time. "I guess we'll find out." Commander Brix X raised his hand, the hall falling into expectant silence. "Fighters ready?" Both combatants nodded. "Begin." Zeph'tar exploded into motion with terrifying speed for something so massive. His first strike, a casual backhand that could have decapitated a lesser opponent, whistled through the air where Kala's head had been a split second earlier. She ducked under it, but his follow-up caught her in the ribs, sending her stumbling backward. The crowd roared approval as Kala gasped, clutching her side. The hit had been like getting kicked by a shuttlecraft. Even pulled back to half strength, Zeph'tar's casual swipe packed enough force to shatter concrete. "Ooh, that had to hurt," Zeph'tar called out, not even breathing hard. "Don't worry, little human. It'll be over soon." He pressed his advantage, launching a series of measured strikes that drove Kala backward across the mat. She managed to avoid the worst of them, but several connected with bruising force. A glancing blow to her shoulder spun her around. An elbow strike to her back sent her stumbling forward. To the watching crowd, it looked like an adult toying with a child. "Is this really all Earth's finest can offer?" Zeph'tar asked the audience, pausing to flex for the cameras. "I'm barely even trying here." Kala rolled away from a stomping kick that would have caved in her chest, but she was clearly on the defensive. Her breathing was labored, and a thin trickle of blood ran from her split lip. The alien cadets were cheering every successful hit, some already counting their winnings. "Come on, human," Zeph'tar taunted, grabbing her by the arm and tossing her across the mat like a rag doll. "At least try to make this interesting." But as Kala picked herself up for the dozenth time, something began to change. Her movements became more fluid, more purposeful. She wasn't just running anymore, she was observing. Every time Zeph'tar struck, she was learning. Every pattern he repeated, she was cataloging. Zeph'tar wound up for another dramatic haymaker, telegraphing the move for maximum crowd effect. This time, instead of simply dodging, Kala stepped inside his reach and drove her elbow into his solar plexus. The strike was perfectly placed, hitting the one soft spot in his otherwise impenetrable defenses. Zeph'tar doubled over, more surprised than hurt. "Lucky shot," he wheezed, straightening up. "But you can't do that again." Except she could, and she did. And the next exchange was different. Zeph'tar came forward with his usual overwhelming aggression, but Kala was no longer where he expected her to be. She slipped his right cross, ducked his left hook, and planted a solid punch into his kidney. The crowd's cheers faltered slightly. "What the hell was that?" Zeph'tar muttered, shaking his head. His strikes were becoming wilder, less controlled. The human wasn't fighting like any opponent he'd faced before. She wasn't trying to match his strength or speed. Instead, she was doing something completely unexpected. She was thinking. Kala darted in again, this time targeting his previously injured left knee. Her kick was surgical in its precision, hitting the exact spot where his old injury had left weakness. Zeph'tar's leg buckled, and for the first time in the fight, he looked genuinely concerned. "Stop dancing around and fight me properly." He roared, lunging forward with both hands extended. It was exactly what Kala had been waiting for. She dropped low, swept his legs, and used his own momentum to send him crashing into the mat. The impact shook the entire platform, and the crowd fell silent. Zeph'tar rolled to his feet, no longer smiling. "You're starting to annoy me, little girl?" "Good," Kala replied, wiping blood from her mouth. Angry fighters make mistakes, and he was making them. His attacks were becoming more brutal but less accurate. His showboating had disappeared, replaced by genuine frustration. The human was supposed to be broken by now, cowering in submission. Instead, she was getting stronger, more confident, more dangerous. "This is impossible," Veltok muttered from the stands. "She's just human." But Torque, who had been watching more carefully than most, shook his head. "Look at her eyes," he said quietly. "She's not just surviving anymore, she's hunting." Zeph'tar threw another wild punch, putting all his considerable strength behind it. Kala sidestepped easily, grabbed his extended arm, and used his own force to throw him into the safety barrier. The reinforced metal bent under the impact. The alien crowd was no longer cheering. They were watching in stunned silence as their undefeated champion struggled to understand what was happening. The little human wasn't supposed to be able to do this. It defied everything they knew about species hierarchy, about evolutionary superiority, about the natural order of things. But Kala Voss had never been particularly concerned with what she was supposed to be able to do. She was just getting started. The fight had been going on for 12 minutes, and Zeph'tar was beginning to feel something he hadn't experienced in years: fatigue. His massive frame, built for devastating short bursts of power, wasn't designed for prolonged combat. Beads of sweat rolled down his obsidian skin as he threw another punch that whistled harmlessly through empty air. Kala, meanwhile, seemed to be hitting her stride. Her smaller frame meant less mass to move, less oxygen to consume, and crucially, less surface area for Zeph'tar to target. She flowed around his attacks like water, never where he expected her to be, always moving, always thinking. "Stand still and fight like a warrior," Zeph'tar bellowed, his frustration mounting with each missed strike. "No thanks," Kala replied, darting between his legs and driving her knuckles into the back of his knee. "I prefer fighting smart." The alien crowd watched in growing unease as their champion began to slow. His movements, once fluid and precise, were becoming labored. His breathing was heavy, his strikes less coordinated. The human, on the other hand, looked like she was just warming up. Zeph'tar swung a massive haymaker that would have taken Kala's head clean off. Instead, she ducked under it and drove her thumb into the nerve cluster just below his armpit. His entire left arm went numb, hanging uselessly at his side. "That's not fair," Rex Mole shouted from the medical section. "That's not honorable combat. Honor is a luxury for people who aren't fighting for their lives," Kala called back, dodging another clumsy swing. She was right, and Zeph'tar was beginning to understand that his opponent had been raised in a completely different school of combat. Where Nexorian warriors learned forms and techniques, humans learned survival. Where his people fought with nobility and tradition, hers fought with whatever worked. Kala slipped behind him and raked her fingers across his eyes. Not hard enough to cause permanent damage, but enough to blur his vision and make him stumble. While he was disoriented, she grabbed his tail, something no honorable opponent had ever done, and used it to yank him off balance. "My tail." Zeph'tar roared indignantly. "You can't grab my tail." "Says who?" Kala asked, releasing it just as he turned to face her. The momentum of his spin left him open for a perfect uppercut to his solar plexus. For the first time in the fight, Zeph'tar staggered backward, clutching his stomach. His chest was heaving, his movements becoming increasingly desperate. The human had absorbed punches that should have shattered her bones, yet she kept coming. Every time he thought he had her finished, she found another gear, another reserve of strength. "This is impossible," he gasped, wiping sweat from his brow. "Humans are supposed to be weak." "Weak?" Kala laughed, though it came out more like a growl. Her face was swollen, her lips split, and purple bruises were blooming across her arms and torso, but her eyes were bright with fierce determination. You think we're weak because we don't have natural armor or super strength? You want to know what makes humans dangerous, Zeph'tar? She feinted left, then drove her knee into his thigh, hitting the pressure point that would cause his leg to cramp. We're too stupid to know when we're beaten. Zeph'tar's leg seized up, and he nearly fell. For the first time since the fight began, genuine fear crept into his crimson eyes. This wasn't going according to plan. The human should have been unconscious minutes ago, not getting stronger and more dangerous. Impossible, he wheezed, backing away from her for the first time in the fight. This is impossible. Nothing's impossible, Kala said, advancing on him with predatory grace. You just never fought anyone who had to earn their survival. The training hall had grown eerily quiet, the earlier cheers and jeers replaced by an uncomfortable tension. Zeph'tar circled warily now, his earlier confidence evaporated like morning mist. His left arm still hung partially numb, his breathing was labored, and for the first time in his life he was genuinely afraid of an opponent. Kala stood in the center of the mat, swaying slightly on her feet. Blood trickled from multiple cuts on her face, and her left eye was swelling shut. To the watching crowd, she looked like she was barely standing, held upright by sheer stubbornness alone. You're finished, human, Zeph'tar panted, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. You can barely stand. Kala nodded slowly, her good eye unfocused. You're right, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't take much more of this. Something in her tone made Zeph'tar pause. Was she surrendering? The smart thing would be to accept her submission and end this nightmare. But his pride, his reputation, his very identity as an undefeated champion demanded a more decisive conclusion. Then kneel, he commanded, straightening to his full imposing height. Kneel and beg for mercy, and I might let you leave with your bones intact. Kala's shoulders sagged, and she took a stumbling step backward. Please, she said, her voice cracking. I give up. I can't fight anymore. The crowd stirred, some relieved that the uncomfortable spectacle was finally ending. Commander Brixt stepped forward, ready to call the match. But Zeph'tar held up a hand, his eyes gleaming with renewed malice. Not good enough, he snarled. You humiliated me in front of everyone. Now you pay the price. He charged forward with all his remaining strength, both arms extended to grab her in a crushing bear hug that would snap her spine like a twig. It was a move that had ended dozens of fights, a signature technique that no opponent had ever escaped. Kala waited until he was 3 steps away, then 2, then 1. At the last possible second, when his massive arms were already closing around her, she moved. But not backward, not to the side. She stepped forward, inside his reach, and dropped to one knee. Her hands shot up, grabbing his outstretched arms at the wrists. Using his own forward momentum against him, she pivoted on her planted knee and threw her entire body into a perfectly executed shoulder throw. Time seemed to slow as Zeph'tar's 8-foot frame flew through the air. His own crushing charge, meant to end the fight in his favor, became the weapon of his defeat. The leverage was perfect, the timing flawless, and the physics absolutely unforgiving. He hit the mat with a sound like a falling tree, his massive weight concentrated on the point where his spine met his shoulders. The reinforced training surface, designed to withstand the impact of multiple species, cracked under the force of his landing. The sound that followed was something the witnesses would never forget, a wet, organic crack that echoed through the suddenly silent hall. Zeph'tar's body went instantly limp, his limbs splaying at unnatural angles as his nervous system shut down. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even breathed. Kala slowly stood up, her apparent weakness vanishing like it had never existed. She looked down at Zeph'tar's motionless form with no satisfaction, no triumph, just professional assessment. Spinal cord severed at the C4 vertebra, she announced clinically. He'll live, but he'll never fight again. Medical team should get him to surgery within the next 10 minutes. if they want to save any motor function below the neck. The hall erupted into chaos. Medical personnel rushed onto the mat, alien cadets shouted in panic and disbelief, and instructors barked orders to restore order. Through it all, Kala stood calmly in the center of the mayhem, wiping blood from her split lip. Commander Brixex approached her slowly, his 3 eyes wide with shock. "How?" he asked simply. Kala looked up at him, her swollen face wearing the ghost of a smile. "You wanted to see what humans are capable of, Commander. Congratulations. You just got your first lesson." She walked off the mat, leaving behind an academy that would never look at humans the same way again. The medical team swarmed around Zeph'tar's motionless form like ants around spilled honey. Dr. Kelm, the academy's chief physician, ran his scanner over the fallen champion's spine while barking orders to his assistants. "Spinal stabilizer, now. Get the neural regeneration unit online. We need to operate immediately." As they carefully lifted Zeph'tar onto a hover stretcher, his eyes rolled toward Kala. He couldn't speak, couldn't move, but the confusion and terror in his gaze spoke volumes. The undefeated champion of the academy had been reduced to a helpless patient in less than 15 minutes. The alien cadets pressed against the safety barriers, their faces masks of shock and disbelief. Many were still processing what they'd witnessed. Veltok stood with his mandibles hanging open, while Grex Mole had gone completely pale, his chitin armor losing its usual lustrous sheen. "This is impossible," whispered Torque, voicing what everyone was thinking. "She's just human." Commander Brixex approached Kala, who was methodically unwrapping the tape from her hands. Her movements were calm, almost meditative, as if she'd just finished a routine training session rather than ending the career of the Academy's most feared fighter. "Kados," Brixex said carefully, "I think we need to have a conversation." Kala nodded, tossing the bloodied tape into a disposal unit. "About what, sir?" "About what just happened here. About what you just did to our top-ranked cadet." His middle eye fixed on her intently. "About what this means for our understanding of human capabilities." A small crowd had gathered around them now, the other instructors and senior cadets hanging on every word. Kala looked around at their faces, noting the mixture of fear, respect, and curiosity in their expressions. "You want to know how a primitive human just defeated your genetic Superman?" she asked. "It's actually pretty simple once you understand what we are." "Enlighten us," Brixex said, gesturing for her to continue. Kala rolled her shoulders, working out the kinks from the fight. "You all think evolution is about getting bigger, stronger, more specialized. That's not wrong, but it's not the whole picture. Humans evolved differently. We didn't develop thick armor or massive muscles or natural weapons. We developed something else entirely." She paused, looking directly at the assembled alien faces. "We developed the ability to adapt, to endure, to think our way out of situations that should have killed us." "But you're so small," protested Maya Chen, one of the human cadets. "So fragile compared to everyone else here." "Exactly," Kala said with a slight smile. "And that's our advantage. Zeph'tar was bred for perfection in a specific environment. High gravity, straightforward combat, honorable dueling. Take him out of that context and he's just another big, strong, predictable opponent." Commander Brix's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "You're saying specialization is a weakness?" "I'm saying over-specialization is a vulnerability," Kala corrected. "Humans are generalists. We can survive in environments that would kill most other species. We can learn new skills faster than anyone expects. And most importantly, we can think creatively under pressure." The crowd was murmuring now, alien cadets discussing this revelation among themselves. Some looked frightened, others intrigued. The carefully maintained hierarchy of the academy was crumbling before their eyes. "There's something else," Kala continued, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "Humans have been fighting each other for our entire history. Not ritual combat or honorable duels, but real warfare. Survival warfare. We learned to fight dirty because clean fighting gets you killed." Dr. Kelm's voice crackled over the intercom. "Commander, we have him stabilized." Surgery will take several hours, but I believe we can restore partial function. He'll never fight again, but he should recover most basic motor skills." Brix nodded, then turned back to Kala. "And what about you? Are you injured?" Kala touched her swollen eye gingerly. "Nothing that won't heal. Humans are also remarkably good at taking damage and staying functional." "I can see that," Brix said quietly. He looked around at the assembled crowd, then back at Kala. "I believe we need to reassess our training protocols and our assumptions about species capability." As the crowd began to disperse, Kala heard whispered conversations in a dozen alien languages. The words human and dangerous came up frequently. She'd accomplished more than just defeating Zeph'tar. She'd shattered the Academy's comfortable assumptions about the natural order of things. The age of underestimating humans was officially over.